VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. This is the 7-7 edition heading into week 16. The Vikings host the Detroit Lions, and for the first time in a very long time, the Vikings are playing a really hyped, pristine version of the Lions. Usually it's like beating up on the kid brother or something like that. And the Vikings have defeated the Lions 5 consecutive times at US Bank Stadium. So we shall see if that streak remains. But I'm going to talk with Tyler Ireland today about some of this Viking stuff, including Nick Mullens and some free agency, a peek ahead to that. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yourself, Dustin?
I have fully recovered from the Bengals loss. The one thing in sports and football, especially Vikings football, that peeves me like none other is losing a 2-score lead. I'd rather just get my doors blown off and then accept it. But yeah, the 17-3 lead didn't sit well with me. It took me a couple hours to get over it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm still not over it. I'm still not over the ending.
Yeah, it completely changed how we look at the next 3 games, because if you won that one, you hung on to the 17-3 lead. All you really had to do was not go 0-3 in these games. And now you got to go 2-3 just to hopefully get in, assuming that the Rams or Seahawks drop a game. Well, going into that contest, the general population of Vikings fans were ho-hum on Nick Mullens, and so were you. We're more of a Jaron Hall crowd, thinking we're not going to get to a Super Bowl anyhow, so why don't we just play the guy? Regrettably, the coaching staff doesn't think that way, so they're trying to get into the damn postseason, and Nick Mullens to them gives them the best shot. I want to know, after you saw a smidgen of Mullens against the Raiders in a game-winning drive, and then a gunslinging afternoon last Saturday, has your opinion on Mullens changed at all?
A little bit, but not by a whole lot. So I do think that the Vikings offense was able to move down the field well. A lot of that was Ty Chandler, but a lot of that was Nick Mullens just being able to pass out of the pocket as opposed to Dobbs. But we had some costly turnovers in that game, and the Bengals defense and DVOA is below average. So, that's a win you want to get, and we weren't able to seal it. And I'm not ready to fully commit to Nick Mullens as far as the bandwagon is concerned. I kind of got carried away with Dobbs, after those first 2 games, and you're fully on the bandwagon. It looks like Lamar light out there, but I think Nick Mullens had a decent game. I think there's stuff to build on, stuff to improve upon with those turnovers if you're able to limit that, but still have him make quick, decisive reads and move the offense down the field. That's about all you can ask for a backup quarterback. But it's only one game. You played a poor defensive team, and this will be a really good litmus test for Mullens as well, just going against a tough Detroit defense.
So he doesn't really excite you, like trying to win 2 out of 3 to get in the postseason. It's just a complete milk toast type of thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's not to say that he can't win 2 out of 3. I think he's capable of it. It's just not very exciting. And, you know what you have in Nick Mullens. You knew what you had in Nick Mullens. And he's done well, but his career touchdown to turnover ratio is not that great. He went to the same college that Brett Favre did. Southern Mississippi was it?
Mm-hmm.
So he's a gunslinger. Favre was a gunslinger. Not to compare the two in any way, but how much can you sort of hardwire into Nick Mullens' head not to turn the ball over? Like when you're in field goal range, okay, you don't need to be Superman. Just it if it isn't there, just let it be incomplete. Greg Joseph goes for the field goal, you win. Just little things like that. I wish he had a bit more situational awareness, and that was something that was really frustrating. And it wasn't just him, it was Kevin O'Connell too in that game. Those last 2 play calls were insane. And I'll touch on that more. Let's see what we're talking about next. Do you want me to talk about it now?
Sure.
Yeah, let's get this over with. So Kevin O'Connell and overtime. So listen, I understand that Kevin O'Connell is not going to call the perfect play every time. And that tush push variation where they were in 11 personnel and you had Brandon Powell, who No disrespect to Powell, but he's the shortest and smallest guy on the team, trying to pile drive Nick Mullens forward. It doesn't work the first time, so why are you doing it again? Why are you not calling timeout? There was some clarification in terms of like, well, the refs were telling us one thing, so we decided not to call the timeout. That doesn't even matter. Just call the timeout. Brian Flores is like hollering at you, call the timeout, call the timeout. He must see something that the Bengals are doing defensively here on fourth down that isn't good for us. So let's just talk this over. He looks discombobulated on, pre-snap. So talk this over, get a better play in there. Like, and that's just one of those things with Kevin O'Connell, I feel like, where I think, he's created a good culture and I think he's a good play caller, but there are certain game management aspects, with, time management, knowing when to call timeout, where he needs to improve upon. And it really shows that he's still a second year head coach. He's still one of the youngest head coaches in the league. So that's something he needs to improve upon. Otherwise, it could rear its ugly head down the stretch here.
O'Connell said after the game that Powell was in there to take the defense out of goal line defense, and that so after the fact, Powell was just merely a perk to push. He wasn't designed to be the pusher. It was supposed to try to keep the defense honest, and he had too much trust in Nick Mullens to get however many inches were needed. So yeah, it's kind of like the end of the Chargers game when they hurry up and tried to catch the Chargers defense off guard. If Hawkinson catches the pass, it looks brilliant. If you just get your damn inches on the sneak, it looks like no brainer. But that's what happens when you lose. You got to dissect the bad stuff. I want to do, before we hop back into the current season, the Vikings free agency. We've talked a lot in the past year about how much cap space the team's going to have, which is a huge perk that they haven't had in a long time. Well, that's mainly because Kirk Cousins isn't financially, he hasn't been extended yet, and then about half the team is a free agent. So I want to get your early take. We'll talk a lot about this in February and March. But other than Hunter and Kirk Cousins, for some, those would be no-brainers at the top of the list. Who is another free agent or two that you absolutely want to see back?
Yeah, so the first two that came to mind for me was Brandon Powell, who I don't blame at all for that play calling debacle last week. I think he was just kind of the man who was assigned to this job, and he probably wasn't the best for it. But overall this season, he's been a great wide receiver 4 when we've had injuries to Jefferson, and Osborne. He's really stepped up and kept the offense moving along. He's done well as just a punt returner, not necessarily being explosive, but just being reliable. Don't muff the punt. We had so many problems with that last season with Rager as the punt return guy. So it's refreshing to not have to, take a deep breath before every punt and hope that your team isn't going to muff it. So Brandon Powell, definitely bring him back. And then another guy too is David Quessenberry. Been a great swing tackle for us. He came in for Darisaw at one point, played really well in pass protection. That's kind of like if Mike Zimmer has his Rashad Hill and Kevin O'Connell could have his David Quessenberry as your reliable swing tackle. And I know we have Brandel too, who is a free agent, but I think as far as swing tackles go, I like Quessenberry a little bit better. But Brandel hasn't been too shabby either. I just don't think the whole Brandel at guard experiment's gonna work. Let's stop putting tackles at guard, please. But those are two guys that I really look at and would like to have the Vikings bring them back.
I agree, and I think there is a very good chance those happen because they won't be premier deals at all. They'll be small, and it's really cool that I think you would agree, we're in a spot where the offensive line from 2012 until 2021, anytime there was an injury in the offensive line, you had to go, oh no. But now this coaching staff has shown that it can pretty much be plug and play for serviceable performance. You don't have to cringe when a guard or a tackle goes down. And somehow it just kind of works that Quessenberry played well against the Falcons, and then he was decent last week against the Bengals. I think it's cool that we've evolved into that era where it's not a big panic attack every time a starter goes down on the offensive line.
And do you remember when I think we had Pat Elflein at the time starting and he got hurt, something happened, And it's like, well, you can't get any worse than Pat Elflein. I'm excited to watch Drew Samia play.
Hmm.
And then we watched Drew Samia play, and it's like, okay, I miss Pat Elflein. Or whoever was starting at guard before. Well, it's not like it can get any worse. And then it does get worse. So it's nice to, have a coaching staff that kind of knows what they're doing with backup offensive linemen,
Yeah, we've
like you
really
said.
got over the hump with that era. Because when O'Neal went down last year, let's see who came in. Was it Udo? Or no, somebody came in for O'Neal, and then Chris Reed took over at center, and it kind of worked. And it just seems that now, through 2 years of sample size, that when you have an injury on the offensive line, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to be elite, but we're going to have a guy who's not a moron. So that's a good thing to see. All right, home field advantage for these Vikings. I think the Vikings will win the next 2 games because I believe this caliber of team is a 4-4 club at home. Right now, they're 2-4. So I'm banking, I think we're going to be able to flip the page a couple months from now, and it would be more understandable that the Vikings finished 4-4 at home rather than 2-6 or 3-5. I know that's a weird way to think of it, but on the whole, because they are 2-4 right now, has the Vikings home field advantage just vanished?
I wouldn't say it's vanished, but let me put it this way. So last season, and I know it's different circumstances, especially with the defense, I was at the Vikings and Giants playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's high stakes game, win or go home, playoffs, right? And it was noticeably quiet. And a lot of that had to do with Donatel's defense, couldn't get a third down stop to save their lives. It was also the first year of Kevin O'Connell, and after years of Zimmer, where I think fans were just used to like a gutted out offensive performance where it's just like run the ball and play action pass. You're not expecting your offense to put up 30 points every game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though they saw the whole season how great our offense was, I don't think the fans were really used to that as far as when you're watching the game at US Bank Stadium, to really feed into that positive energy. Um, but I'll say this: when your team isn't getting those third down stops on defense, and when your team isn't converting on offense, it does really suck all the energy out of US Bank Stadium. But if you're able to get to an early lead and Flores' defense is really asserting itself, then yeah, US Bank Stadium can go crazy. It can be one of the hardest places for an opposing team to play because of just like the architecture of that building and how it retains sound. But fans aren't just going to show up and yell all game long
Mm-hmm.
if the players and the team isn't really giving them a reason to. So it just really depends how they play. And, the whole vibe of the season is just changed post Kirk Cousins injury. So I think fans are even more nervous now than they were before. So I'm not sure if that's going to lead to more of a quiet environment in US Bank Stadium, or fans will be more hyped when they do score because it's like, oh my gosh, our offense did something, and that feeds into the energy. But I can only speak from last year's experience at US Bank. But I know before that, though, like when we had Zimmer and fans knew we had a good defense, they got loud. They got loud for sure. So, it just depends.
Yeah, from 2016 until the onset of the pandemic, the Vikings' home field advantage was right up there with wins and losses with the Patriots, with Brady's Patriots. That's how ferocious it was, and then it just kind of petered off, especially with no fans there in 2020, and it hasn't truly returned. At Cincinnati, I was at Paycor Stadium for that loss, like I said, and everybody there stood the whole time. Everybody was just standing the entire time, and there's only a handful of Vikings games I can remember at US Bank Stadium where folks did that. And then on the home field advantage. So there's not a whole lot of regular season games at US Bank Stadium since it opened in 2016 where it is win or you are screwed, because the Vikings are usually already know what you're getting by this time on the calendar. And the one exception was 2020, but fans weren't there. There was a 2018 game against, I think it was the Bears or the Packers or both, where they absolutely had to win. I think it was the Bears, and then they didn't. So this game is going to have a unique vibe that if you win, you're going to be in the driver's seat. If you lose, you're probably screwed. Your backs will be against the wall. No matter what the game you'll be attending, the Packers game on New Year's Eve, that one's either going to be desperation, you absolutely have to win, or it is over, or it's going to be boom, you win this, you're going to be cooking, baby. So these next two games are unique, and I go to all of the home games, and it's just that the way that each season progresses, usually this late on the calendar, the games are important, but they're not do or die like the next two feel. So that's something to monitor. All right, my thoughts and predictions on this game. Brian Flores has a really good and juicy history against Jared Goff. I think that rings through. I do trust Nick Mullens to do the thing in this game, and I just believe that the Vikings have enough juice against this inconsistent Lions team. I've said for almost the entire season now that the Lions are actually a good team. They're going to get to the postseason, but they're not great. They're not like the 49ers or like the Eagles were a month ago. So I do think the home field advantage will translate to a Vikings team that does feel cornered, especially because it wants to make the postseason. And I think the Vikings will win 30-20. What say you? Thoughts and a score prediction?
Yeah, so Nick Mullens is obviously an X factor there, but I think the bigger X factor is Ty Chandler. So Ty Chandler looked great last week. There's no question about it, and I do think he deserves to start over Madison. I don't even think Madison's playing this week, but I'm just saying for the future, definitely Ty Chandler over Madison. But there's a huge difference between the Bengals defensive line and the Lions defensive line. And Ty Chandler he's not the most physically imposing running back. Obviously he's got that yak ability and he's pretty explosive, but he's not a bruiser. So I question how easy it will be for him to run in between the tackles against a really solid defense. But if he's able to, and he's able to take that stress off of Nick Mullens, yeah, we definitely have a fighting chance. It's really nice to know that, we have a running back who's capable of rushing for over 100 yards in a game. Like, wasn't it last week the first time we had that running back rush for over 100 yards in the entire season?
Yeah, since
I mean,
Cooks were propped up last year by ginormous runs. It was the
yeah,
most consistently dominant feeling running back performance since Cook in 2021.
yeah, no, it's just pretty crazy. But I don't know if I've seen enough from the Vikings for me to confidently say that they would win this game. So I understand that they are in the corner, and I do think that they're going to really try to bust their ass. And there is a desperation feeling here. But the Lions are going into this knowing that the Vikings are a better team now than they were last season. As far as defensively, you've got another year under the same offense. So that's good. Even without Kirk, there's just a different threat level that we have. And I don't think that the Lions are sleeping on us. So I don't think they're going to come in here, be ho-hum, and, oh, it's okay. We have a better record. We'll kind of figure it out. If the Lions win this game, they win the division.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is their motivation. Let's just seal this now. And let's just, secure the division and beat our rival. And I don't think the Vikings win this game. I really don't. I think we lose 21-20. We're going to give it everything we have. I don't think it's going to be an effort thing, but I just don't think it's there.
So the game you will attend will be total desperation, like losing you're out.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Saints were not helpful on Thursday Night Football against the Rams.
Neither were the Seahawks.
No, not getting any outside help there. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game, though, because, we have a better chance to win this game at US Bank Stadium against the Lions versus on the road.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really going to get your crap together, now is the week to do it.
It's worth noting on that rushing talking point that you had. Cincinnati for rush defense, DVOA ranked 29th, which is also known as fourth worst. And the Lions rush defense is fourth best for DVOA. So it will be a change of pace. And then I'll conclude the show on this note for Vikings fans to monitor. These next 3 games for Ty Chandler are ultra pivotal. It's a hinge for him to figure out, and the team, if he is the RB1. Because let's say he busts off 130 yards this week, and then one more game, he hits 90 or 100. They can reasonably waltz into the next offseason saying, all right, we got our RB1. Maybe we'll draft the dude with a 4th round pick or something, 5th round pick. So he has the chance to seize the job by the esophagus and make it his own. Otherwise, if he doesn't, it will turn out that, he had a great game against the shitty rush defense. We're going to have to go find probably a different running back. He has that. I think he'll have that opportunity, assuming they don't just swing back to Madison when he's healthy. Do you agree?
Somewhat. I do think Ty Chandler has a lot to play for here to try and assert himself as, a legitimate starting option and not just a really nice scat back. Like, I'm more than just like a Jerick McKinnon who can be good, but there's sort of a cap on how many carries you can give the guy each week. But just with the way the season has progressed, the Vikings brass is going to want to avoid whatever happened this season. Just like they're not just going to bring back Kirk and not draft a quarterback. And I also think they've been really disappointed with the running backs. And I don't think their entire plan to improve next season is going to be Ty Chandler is that guy. They're going to want a bit more insurance back there because Madison has not been doing the job effectively. Even as, an RB2, it's like you can point to some plays where it's like, he did well in pass protection, or he actually has improved the last few games, but it just hasn't been consistent enough from Madison. And you are asking a lot out of a late round running back to be the guy without any competition, really. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings brought in a free agent running back. Heck, Josh Jacobs is only 25, and I know Kwesi isn't the type to overpay for a running back, but if he sees this team as kind of like we can win now with some young pieces, maybe you do. Or maybe we can take stress off of Kirk Cousins, who's coming off of a major Achilles injury, and actually have a competent run game. Because I do think this Vikings team wants to be a bit more balanced than they have been this season. So we'll see what happens there. But Chandler definitely has a lot to play for regardless. So
yeah, the offense went through an odd dynamic because last season they threw at a clip that was like a top 5, which is fine, but they talked all offseason about more balance and rushing. That's why they signed Josh Oliver, and then they came out and didn't do it. They didn't do it at all. It took like a month, and then in the last 2 months they've got more equitable. Once they kind of got Madison cooking a little bit, and now they've discovered Chandler. All right, man. Where do you write, and what is your Twitter handle?
Yep, I write for Daily Norseman, and my Twitter handle is Tyler Ireland MIN. Thanks for having me on, man.
Heck yeah! When you are back on the show in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the Lions again. So you have a wonderful time. We'll probably see you up there for Packers Vikings, and we'll talk to you on this show in 2 weeks. All right.
Awesome. See you there, Dustin. Talk to you later.
Later.